Mike Lindell is best known as the inventor and CEO of MyPillow. However, his notoriety seems to somehow has gone from going from a drug addict to a CEO is beginning to even exceed his MyPillow fame. In fact, Mike helps now a lot of people recover from their addictions, and he's launched LRN, which is the Lindell Recovery Network, which helps millions of people find recovery and Jesus through the help, hope, and mentorship. What are the odds? Oh, and by the way, that's the name of his latest book, which you can get at his table out at the concourse. How about a big Christian welcome from Mike Lindell?
Since the mid-1980s. That switched to crack cocaine in the early 2000s. My self-worth just kept getting worse and worse. I drove into the MyPillow. God gave it to me in a dream. You know, I wanted to be able to walk down the streets and anything that anybody wanted in a pillow, MyPillow would have. We're gonna make the biggest infomercial in history, and it's gonna change the world. That infomercial launched October 7, 2011, and I went from 10 employees to 500 employees in 40 days. In the spring of 2008, it was an intervention. I've been up for 14 days doing crack cocaine. Give me that phone. He says, I'm gonna take a picture of you. He says, you're gonna need it for that book you've been bragging about. And he says, we're not going to let you die on us. On January 16, 2009, God freed me from these and other addictions. I'm going to do this platform thing, and I want to wake up in the morning and never have the desire for anything again. Never had a dream about it. I never looked back.
You ever see this guy with the pillows on Fox? Mike Lindell.
There's nobody on this planet I'd rather have as my president than Donald Trump.
Be the most amazing president this country's ever seen in history.
I see promises made and promises kept. I knew my calling, that God had chose me for this to help people.
Are you ready? Are you kidding? I've been waiting for this my whole life.
Hello, test. I got a loud voice, but not that loud. Well, I'm going to tell my story here that I want to start with one of my biggest fears in life was public speaking. God can call people for anything, and that's for him to call me to speak out for Jesus would have been, the odds of that are the most bizarre odds in history in my life. But my story, when I'm talking to you today, I'm going to talk about addiction too, because addiction isn't just someone on the street that you think of as homeless. Addiction affects all of us, no matter how many forks we eat with. And, you know, for my story, it begins back when I was 7 years old, when divorces weren't common. My parents divorced, and I was the only kid put into a school where I was from a broken family, and every other, so I felt like an outcast. I felt like I didn't fit in. That manifested, I would either show off or I wouldn't talk to people. We'd be driving down our bus one time, going 40 miles an hour. These two guys, I said, I'll bet you I can jump out this bus window. And I did, and it was to show off, to fit in, but there were all these lies of unworthiness and all these devil's lies. And one of the things, I worked at I ended up dropping out of college in the first quarter, and all I was doing at the time, I'd worked at a drive-in movie theater and a grocery store, and I got fired at the grocery store. Well, by the time my 5-year class reunion came along, now I was so upset with that I wasn't where I should have been in life, and all my other classmates had either graduated from college, started families, advanced their careers, and at that reunion, I took over the reunion and I started talking about the things I had done. I go, yeah, I got 17 traffic tickets on a motorcycle, outrunning the cops. I owed the mafia $20,000 and they came to break my arms. And I went skydiving and I was on the way down there on a motorcycle and fell asleep, crashed the motorcycle, got back up, all bloody, went down, did a jump with my parachute didn't open, all in the same day. So everyone in the class reunion is going, wow, wow, But I got home that night and I laid in bed and it was a deep sadness I had. It was where I wanted what they had. It was just something missing. And we talk about God too. I had been brought up, I had good roots planted, good seeds planted, but I just felt something was, it was so missing. I just laid in bed and number one, I knew I wasn't where I could be in life. And then about, I had two parallel tracks going, my addiction and entrepreneur. So I tried different businesses. I think my sister flooded a third-story apartment complex, and so I became with a waterbed, so I became a carpet cleaner. Here in this picture, I was in treatment one of the many times I went in treatment for my DWIs or other things. And some guy said, yeah, I used to do a lunch wagon business in California. I said, well, that's kind of nice. I'll try that in Minnesota. So, but I tried all these different things, but I still was in the early 80s, I was just completely lost. And but then I got into cocaine. And I'll tell you, then I could talk to people. I was a very functioning addict for 20 years. God handed me what I thought was what I wanted the most, was a marriage and kids, and handed me that on a silver platter, basically. And we were very functioning addicts. And but we owned a bar. That was probably too good a place for an addict. But it's funny though, the bars would close, and I knew there was still something missing. The bars would close, we'd all go afterwards to one of my buddies' house, and I would sit there and I'd get into conversations about end times or about Jesus, I read about this in jail, you guys, when I was reading the Bible. And some of my friends then, at last count, I think there were 28 back then that fell in the Lord, and quit that night, and I'm going, what am I saying? I'm losing friends, I would try and talk them into something that I wanted to believe, and God kept chasing me all my life. I had 14 near-death experiences, all these things that I look back and I say you have a 1 in a million or a 1 in a billion, or this is a complete miracle. When you add them together and say it has to be a miracle, it has to be God. But in the early 2000s, it switched to crack cocaine. And when crack it brought me down real fast in my bar. And at the time, I had to sell my bar. It seemed really devastating. I look back now, I think things that happened to us in life, we look back, I wouldn't change one thing if I'm not where I'm at right now. And you learn from it, or something that's devastating at the time, turns out you look back and go, wow, that's a good thing it happened. That was God's plan. Well, anyway, on the same track then, I had sold the bars and I had just a little bit of money left, and I had a dream of a pillow. I actually dreamt the name MyPillow first, and I would get these prophetic dreams all the time, so I wrote down MyPillow, and I had this map wrote down and of what the factory's going to look like. And my daughter, she comes upstairs, one of my daughters, she goes, what are you doing, Dad? I said, I'm going to invent this pillow. It's going to be called MyPillow. It's going to change the world. And she grabs her glass of water. She says, that's really random, Dad, and went back downstairs. Well, it took about a year to invent, and I didn't give up. My friends mocked me. They go, well, Mike's going to invent a pillow. What is he, on crack? Yeah, I was. But they couldn't use that for an excuse. But I just dove into that with my addictive personality. I wanted some self-worth, and we completely ran out of money then. But we had the pillow invented. One of my sons, every day we'd tear foam, stuff would be flying around the neighborhood, and when I finally had it, I went in box stores everywhere. How many would you like? I remember going in a Bed Bath & Beyond, going, I have the best pillow ever invented. How many would you like? I got so excited. They go, I need to talk to your manager. He goes, I am the manager, and you need to leave now. So we had this complete shutout, and then someone said to me, Mike, why don't you do a kiosk? I said, how do you spell that? And I didn't know a kiosk, but we did this kiosk, and I could only be there one of the days because I told you I couldn't talk to people. I mean, if I, you know, I look back now and that was fear of rejection. You don't get rejected if you don't talk to people. So all the devil's lies inside that I would mask with drugs or whatever with addiction, that you know, all these false lies that I'm not good enough, I'm unworthy, and getting false courage too, also with addiction. Well, so we did that kiosk, and I was only there one day, and this guy came up and he bought a pillow from me, and he said, you got a business card? I go, I didn't know what a business card was. I said, I'm all out. I said, here, I wrote my name on a piece of paper. Well, a month went by. I had to borrow Christmas present money from an ex-bookie because we had completely broke, and I had 4 little kids at the time. Well, then, so there was me not having a skill. I thought, how am I going to, you know, if this fails, I'm back to square one, only worse. Well, in January, that one guy that I was there that one day, he called me up. He said, are you the guy that invented this pillow? And he goes, yeah. He goes, well, I bought one from you. Remember, that was the only day I was there, the only pillow I sold. And he goes, I bought one, and he goes, it changed my life. He said, and I run the Minneapolis Home and Garden Show. Would you like a spot in there? And I said, sure. Well, what I did then is I redid the booth, and I put a table in between me and the people, and where they came up, they actually had an agenda, and I changed the wording, the advertising, everything behind me, and I could sit there and tell, and all of a sudden the first day I sold probably 15, 20 pillows, and my pillows. Well, the next day, they all came back. It's never happened before or since. It's like God sent them back. They paid to get in that show again, and they came up to me at the booth, and they're going, this pillow changed my life and all this stuff. And I'm going, and for me, it wasn't about the money. I felt good inside that I had actually done something worthy or done something good, where I felt good about myself. And then I was hooked on doing pillow shows. No, but during that time then, so I did home shows and fairs for years, making them during the week, selling them weekends, even here in Ohio, all across the country. But at the same time, I had a parallel track going, addiction of crack cocaine, compulsive gambling, alcohol, you name it, but crack being the worst thing. And I couldn't do crack at the shows because it's such a paranoid drug. So it was a lot of work. I know anybody ever in addiction, people say to me all the time, Mike, you work all the time. I go, no, I don't work. I love what I'm doing. Addiction is work. Anybody that's been in addiction, it's the hardest job there is what happened then is that this parallel track, I ended up getting divorced in 20-year marriage in 2007. She couldn't take it anymore. People were taking our company, and we were making pillows in our living room, basically. They were taking everything, and a lot of stuff we brought on ourselves. But there was so much betrayal too, and she left, and then you had all these. It got down to 2008, and in 2008, in the beginning of 2008, I lost the one house. I was living in this house out in this woods, and I was all by myself, and I had been on this little public access TV channel where one time I went in there, this lady had seen me at a home show, and she said, Mike, can you come visit me sometime at the TV station? And I said, sure. Well, I was heading down to Minneapolis to buy drugs anyway one day, so I get down there, and I said, well, I couldn't meet my dealer for another hour, so I stopped in that TV station, and she goes, Mike, I want you to go on TV right now. And I go, I'm not going on TV. They're the last thing you'd ever see me going on TV. And she kept talking me into it, and she goes, oh, he's just going to ask you a couple questions. And finally, I reluctantly said, okay. I said, well, can I come back in an hour? Because I want to go get my drugs, right? And she says, no. Well, people that watch that on TV all my people that didn't know me that watched it said, "What were you on, drugs?" And then all the people that knew me said, "You didn't have any drugs, did you?" You know, yeah, because I was like, you know, it was, but this lady was a nice Christian lady, and she kept running this in the middle of the night for free, just this little interview, and I would get sales from that every now and then throughout 2007 and early 2008. You know, I might get 2 pillows a week where somebody calls, and it was usually like 3 in the morning, because that's when she would air this for free. Well, that particular night in February of 2008, I'm sitting by my desk there doing cocaine, and the phone rings, and my phone rings, and this lady gets on there, and she says, she goes, "Are you this guy I've seen on Channel 6? I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, all I know is you have a big calling, and God told me to call you up and pray with you that what you're doing is really important to God." And I said, "Sure." So she's praying, and I'm putting her on mute and doing lines, and she went on for probably a half hour, but I listened, and she hung up. 2 hours later, by the way, these guys are my friends now. I've met them since, this is what, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. But anyway, 2 hours later, another lady calls up. She goes, now realize I maybe get 3 calls a week. And this lady calls up, she goes, "Yeah," she said, I see it on Channel 6. She says, I'm not buying a pillow, but she says, "God wanted me to call you. If you don't mind, I'd like to pray with you." And I'm going, seems to be the deal, right? So she starts praying. She went on for an hour and a half, you know, and I'm doing lines and putting it on mute, and at least I had someone to listen to, right? At the end, and this went on till probably 11:30. Well, then at 3 in the morning, I get the 3rd call. And this guy calls up. He says, "Are you that guy on TV on Channel 6? I says, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, let me tell you something, pal. I don't believe in God, but I keep getting these nightmares that God's telling me to call you and say what you're doing is important for him. I hope my dreams stop now, you jerk." He slams the phone down. But 7 o'clock in the morning, at 7 o'clock in the morning, another lady calls, and I answered the phone. I says, "You don't want to buy a pillow, you want to pray." She says, "How do you know?" I said, "Seems to be the thing today." And so she prayed, and those were the 4 calls that, now 2 of them I stayed in contact with, but all of them said that I had this platform, that this was so important to God. And we all have a calling, but I knew that that there wasn't the pillow, that there was a bigger calling. I knew that the pillow, I instinctively knew that the pillow was some kind of a platform, but I didn't know, that it was, I knew it was going to be for God, but I didn't know, how that was going to work out. I thought it was just helping people maybe out of addiction. Well, anyways, which actually comes up here in the story. After those people called that night, I had to head down to Minneapolis because I had a warrant out for my arrest. And on this particular thing, I was going to be found innocent, which I was. Well, anyway, I was downtown Minneapolis. I had been awake for 14 days, okay? And I had used 3 different dealers that they're some of the biggest dealers in Minneapolis. And I come out of the bathroom or come out of the bedroom, and they're all 3 standing there. Now realize they had never met, but they knew of each other. So it's like they're each territories. They're sitting there, and they're going, I go, "What are you guys doing?" They go, the one guy says, "You've been up for 14 days and we're all cutting you off." And I go, "What is this, an intervention?" He said, "Call it whatever you want, Mike." And I'm going, okay. Well, I felt a little confident. He goes, "How much crack you have left?" I had a couple crack rocks left. Well, the one guy went out to the street and he got the word out. And I've asked him since, "How did you get the word out?" He said, "Well, we just said if you see some crazy white guy with a mustache, if you sell him anything, we'll kill you." And so the one guy left, and the other guy sat there and tried to wait me out. And I kept smoking the crack, and he's still awake, and he wasn't even talking. And I'm down where I'm scraping the pipe, and I'm on my knees, carpet farming we call it in the crack world, looking for anything that might have been some crack you dropped, and it's just horrific. And I'm sorry, I had been up for so long, I wasn't even getting the paranoia you would normally get. Once you get beyond a certain point, it's just like, it was almost to maintain. Well, I went out the door and went down to the streets of Minneapolis, And those guys had got the word out. I kept going further and further out and could not buy crack. Then I made a big mistake, what turned out to be a godsend. I started offering like $100 for $5 worth. Well, nobody's gonna do that because they figure that's not even normal. But I came back upstairs and he was waiting up for me. And he looked at me and he goes, man, you've been telling us for years this MyPillow thing is just a platform for God, and you're gonna come back someday and help us all out of this addiction world we're living in, and we're not gonna let you die on us. And he said, give me that phone. He goes, I'm gonna take a picture for that book you've been telling us you're gonna write someday. This is that picture he took, which is on the cover of my book where it changes to where I'm at now. But I would tell them, drug dealers, just like I did my friends all the time, I wanted to quit. I wanted to find the Lord. I was, God was chasing me, but I could see in the future this, this big platform. Now, did I want to do it today? If I knew, at one point I knew God had chosen me for this big calling, and I used it against him. I go, man, if you got me called, I can do anything. My sister called me up. She goes, you got to quit standing in front of semis. God's going to choose someone else. This was in 2008 too. She goes, you can't just because you think you got this calling, and you can't just keep, I felt I could do anything because I could procrastinate. It doesn't matter if I wait another year, another whatever. And that was right after that 14 days being up. I'm going to throw in this story too. This is one that's in the book. I actually, after that 14 days, I woke up 2 days later and I realized that I had to take a chance to go out to Carver, Minnesota. Remember, I got a warrant out for my arrest. But if I missed this, getting these papers to my brother, MyPillow would not be here. And so I took a chance and I drove out this little schoolhouse we were working out of in Carver. And it's got a driveway you go into. It's like the Hotel California. Once you're in, you ain't getting out. There's only one way in and out. And I went to pull in, and Larry the cop was pulling out. The odds of that, astronomical. So I quick flew up the hill and I grabbed my papers and I got out, and he's reaching for his gun and shaking like Barney Fife. And I'm going, and he goes, Mike, stop right there. And I go, Larry, here's exactly what I said to him. I said, if these papers don't get to my brother, I said, something in the future, it has to do with God. Millions of people are going to be affected. And I said, you're going to arrest me anyway. And I said, I'm going to be found innocent next Tuesday. And if I'm not, Larry, I promise you can arrest me anytime and I'll have cocaine on me. And he looked at me like, what's wrong with you? Well, he let me call my brother, and I'm going to quick fast forward this one. I was found innocent the following Tuesday, but I didn't see Larry for 9 years, okay? And 9 years later, this is 2 years ago, I was in my hometown, and we were throwing pillows out to the little kids in our hometown parade, and we were just ready to go. And all of a sudden, this cop car pulls up with like the old days, woo, 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 woo. And I'm having flashbacks, right? So I jump, the door opens up, and it's Larry. And I go, Larry, he says, Mike, am I in that book you wrote? He says, you know what I did for the people. And it was funny, but he validated that this calling. But anyway, you go back to 2008 now, and a couple more things happened in 2008 that are real significant. One is, I always thought I was hiding my addiction from my kids, even after the divorce, and my son was living with me. We had went down on a hunting trip to Iowa, and we came back up, and he had been living with me, and all of a sudden, he's 18, and he didn't walk to the door with me, and he turned around, and his lips are quivering, and I go, what's the matter? And he goes, I want to go live with my brother, and I just broke my heart, and I'm going, and I didn't want him to explain why, I go, I didn't want to hear it, but I knew I hadn't hid anything. And it was so sadness inside, just him having to tell me with lips quivering, and I said, no, that's fine, and of course, then he left. Well, then it was by the end of 2008, I had lost, the pillow was just a little blip once in a while, because I would not do a show if I couldn't be straight. So I would have either other people or whatever, but I had very few shows getting done. And what happened then in 2008, in December, I was losing that place in the woods too. I had 6 more days there. I'm laying in there staring at the ceiling, and all of a sudden, Dick Van Sloan shows up. Now let me tell you about Dick. He was my equal. We had both started cocaine in the early 80s. We had both switched to crack, but I had heard a rumor that he had found the Lord 4 years earlier, and he had quit everything. And here he shows up out of the blue, and I go, Dick, what are you doing here? He goes, man, the Lord led me here. What are you doing? And I go, well, as long as you're here, I got some questions. And I said to him, the first question I asked him, I said, Dick, is it boring? He said, no, man, it ain't boring. And I drilled him with questions. Now realize I had been in secular treatment throughout the 80s and 90s. Like it was, you go there every time you get a D-dub or do something bad, you go to treatment to get your license back or to avoid jail time. It's a game you play. Well, but Dick told me, what Dick is telling me here, I respected him as my hope match. He was my match in every way. If he made it through and the answer was Jesus, I'm going, wow, I'm going, that fits perfect. I'm supposed to quit, I guess I got this big platform. But like I say, I drilled him for about 2 hours, where like in secular treatment, you do that. These counselors that maybe haven't been there and they went to college for 4 years, addicts have forgotten more about addiction than they would ever know. And that's why I firmly believe that all your teen challenges, Salvation Armies, Union Gospels, this is what works. The seculars is what doesn't. You need a foundation of Jesus, And but Dick left that day. Dick left that day, and I didn't quit that day. I made on January 16, 2009. Now realize this. January 16, 2009. That day they say, well, Mike, was that your bottom? And I'm going, well, I made sure I didn't have any money left. I had no physical thing left. But for me, that I wanted to show, with God, all things are possible, this great comeback. But I knew one thing instinctively. I knew if I waited one more day, my calling was going to be gone. I knew that. It's like in my book, I describe it as 2 reels on on the second feature at a drive-in movie. You got 2 movies you get to choose from, reel A and reel B. If I waited till January 17th, reel A my calling was going to be gone forever. It would be wherever that got taken on reel B, on this movie B. And so that night, I had a prayer. I said, God, I'll do this platform thing. But I said, whatever this was going to be, I didn't really know. I really believe that time it was just, to get people out of addiction, to help them by example. Well, anyway, I said, I want to wake up in the morning and never have the desire again. And I woke up the next morning and it was gone. It was like Groundhog Day. I'm going, something's different, And so I was set free there. Now, was that the day I surrendered to Jesus? No. But it did, the desire was completely gone. Well, then during those 2 months, I know my sister, I went and lived with my sister. She's very close to the Lord, and of course she hid baking soda, spoons, anything that going, you don't need to hide it, I'm done, And she said, you need to pray for favor, because my company was completely taken by these guys that, and it was almost a blackmail thing. I needed to come up with $30,000, which would be like impossible. And Cindy said, well, pray for favor. I go, what's this favor thing? And she tells me about favor in the Bible. Well, now realize I couldn't talk to people. So this is the funny part of the story. A week later, I had heard about this guy. He said, if you ever need help, these guys are kind of mavericks. He said, I had met this guy in a bar a week before I quit. And he said, he was some cowboy guy named Bob. And he said, yeah, if you ever need help, these guys are mavericks. They might even borrow money for, no collateral and stuff. And so I sat there on January 18th, and I had to come up with this 30 grand in 5 days. And so I went back to that bar, and I went in there, and I asked the bartender, you remember that guy with a cowboy hat, blah, blah, blah. He says, yeah, that's Bob. He comes in about once a month, and he was just here a couple weeks ago. And no, I don't have his number. At that moment in time, Bob walked in the door, and he walks in, and I go, hey, remember you told me about these guys? And he says, yeah, well, he called them up to get an appointment. The closest he could get was 2 hours before I had to have this money to pay these crooked bad guys off. So I said, yeah, that's fine. So I checked it off my list, right? This favor thing, I already kind of assumed I was going to get the 30 from them. Well, that following Friday, I walk in there with this stuff. Now remember, I was afraid of anybody with a suit or a tie on, that I wasn't worthy, that they were, that I was intimidated by them. Well, I walk in with a t-shirt on, carrying a pillow and 3 jars of foam, and I walk in there and there's a CIEO, a CEO, a CFO, all these C's, and I'm going, and there's 8 of them around the room, and they go, and I said, I invented this pillow. It's called MyPillow. I need to borrow 30 grand. I'll pay you back 40 grand within 2 months. I'm going to do shows, home shows and fairs like I used to do. And I said, these guys took my company, and I said, I used to be a crack cocaine addict, and I'm going on. Their CFO goes, when did you quit crack? I said, last Thursday. And they go, and 4 of them got up and left the room like Shark Tank and said, for that reason, we're out. Well, the other 4 ended up borrowing me that money, and to this day, they didn't know why they did it. We know why they did it, and I did get them paid back. That was just of these miracles that started happening. Well, for the 2 years then, I spent getting my company back for the home shows and fairs, and still nobody would take us. And so I told my friends and family, I said, let's do an infomercial. And I said, I want to do it like we do it at the fairs and stuff, with a real audience and just a friend of mine. And all these people said, no, it'll never work. You need an actor, and no, this is a bad idea. Infomercials don't work. But I believed in it so much. I said, it's going to be the biggest infomercial in the world. I kept telling my friends, and so we all put our money in. Well, that went to film this in August of 2011. And this producer came in from California, and they sat in that thing while we were doing our reads and said, and I'm doing my reads back there, and he texts the other guy, said, this is the worst guy I've ever seen. He'll never make it on TV. And the other guy texted me, he's paying you just to humor him. Well, the next day he was right. I was so petrified of the audience, I couldn't talk. I literally stopped. So we brought in a table, and we took away the teleprompter, and I did it just like I did it at those shows all those years. And it aired October 7th, 2011, in the middle of the night. I was living in my sister's basement with nothing left again. And we had 10 employees, and 40 days later, we had 500 employees. It just went, But I wish it ended there. I took in $100 million in 6 months. But up from 200,000, it was crazy. I told my friend, I go, do you know that ATMs don't go to the 7th digit? And he goes, no, Mike, I don't know that. And I'm going, it was crazy. All this money came in. But these guys that were doing our ads and stuff and all these things, I didn't know any of that stuff, and I just trusted people. I made deals with people. I go, is that the best deal you got? And they go, yeah. And so I trusted. And plus, at the same time, I had fell away from God in my, praying or anything I was doing with God. Well, at the end by 6 months into June of 2012, I was $6 million in debt. I'd taken in all that money, and it was very scary. I go, God, that's, of course, I think people don't pray, I believe, until a lot of people, they don't pray and they don't reach out to God unless things are bad. If things are going good, people tend to, oh yeah, just skate along. Well, that's kind of where I was. I'm going, God, just give me one more chance here. And it kept going down and down. And by the summer of, we got in some box stores, and by the summer of 14, we were within 2 days of going under, and I met this gal, Kendra, it's in the book, and she said, you need to pray, and she said, and I could tell she had something I didn't have, and then she finally caught it. She goes, you don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ. I go, yes, I do. I believe in God. I wear my cross on TV. Of course, I wear it in the crack houses too. I was always telling people, trying to be that person. Now, whether I was posing or not, I don't think so. I really thought I was that person. But she called me out on it, and she said, no, you need to do a full surrender. You're not going to be able to speak out for Jesus if you don't have Jesus. And well, that bothered me, but I knew she was right. Well, then things for me, the way I came to the Lord, by the way, it's 3 years after that day, so we're getting to that. After that, I brought everything in-house to MyPillow. I brought everything in-house, advertising everything, did it ourselves, and through a lot of prayer, I believe, from her and a lot of other people, we started recovering. We did a commercial. We started recovering right away in 14. Well, then things started happening to me. When I say, I use mathematics to know that Jesus exists, that God exists. And I've always done that, and I've always gone, wow, show me, whether it's a near-death experience or some miracle. Well, things, God kept showing me so many things where the normal person would have went, what's wrong with you? How much do you have to see to just do a full surrender? And anyway, well, he showed me a lot then. In the spring of 15, I was in New York City, and I had a dream that I would be meeting Donald Trump in a room. And I'm going, why would I want to meet Donald Trump in a room, in some office? And there were things behind me. And I told my friends about the dream. Well, then all of a sudden he runs for president in June. Well, I end up going to Israel that fall, and I got over there, and these are all things that just led up to me being saved. I got over there, and I'm going, wow, you have proof that, that Jesus is real, all this evidence. So I loved it over there. But I also, I was finding out the guy I went with, since I had this dream and now Donald Trump's running for president, I had to find out what a liberal was, what a conservative was. I had never voted. I didn't know anything. I was a crack addict. I didn't know that politics even mattered to Christians, or to anybody. I mean, it was just like somebody else's problem. Well, then things started happening to me that never happened to people. It's just random. I get invited to the National Prayer Breakfast, and I'm random, for me being there, that was like just so random. I would never have went to a prayer breakfast, especially the national one. I would have felt like an outcast, not that I shouldn't be there because I'm not worthy. Well, I was randomly picked by 12 people to pray in a room with Ben Carson. And here's that picture. And I'm in that room, and they're praying, and I'm going, man, I hope I don't have to pray. I'm all nervous in there. But they said, a couple of you are going to become, this prophet guy said, a couple of you are going to become good friends and change the course of history, or help change the course of history. Well, me and Dr. Carson are very good friends now, and we were the two in that room. We've talked about that many times since. But that was in January of that year when he was running for president. Then it got to be spring, there was all these things that I don't have time to tell you, but things that don't happen, I'm going, that can only be God. That can only be God. I'm just a crack addict, an ex-crack addict. This is impossible that I'm getting put in these positions. Well, I knew that I had seen that prophetic dream though, and it got to be late July of 2016, and I'm on a plane to California. And I was up over 10,000 feet, and I had my phone set to ding when you got an email. And I sat there in that front seat, and I had this magazine about Donald Trump, and I opened the magazine. I just got frustrated for a minute there, and I shut it, and I said, God, I need to know, what do I have to do with Donald Trump in this election or whatever? It was very frustrating. I need an answer right now. At that moment in time, my phone dinged. Hello, Mike, this is Donald Trump. Will you meet me at Trump Hotel in New York City? And I'm going, God? I'm going, I'm sitting there crying in the bulkhead. The flight attendant's going, are you okay? I go, yes, it's a miracle. And it wasn't that I was going to meet Donald Trump. It's that God answered me in real time. God answered me in real time. And then it was even more scary because I'm going, okay, now I'm going to meet this guy. And I didn't know, what am I bringing to the table? I didn't know why he wanted to meet me even. I thought, does he want money? I had no idea. And And then right before that meeting came to pass on August 15, 2016. And let me tell you, they told me when I went in to meet him, they said, you're never going to meet him alone, and whatever you do, don't tell him you were a crackhead. Oh. And well, by a series of divine appointments, that meeting, people kept getting pulled off as we were going in there, and all of a sudden it got down to just me, and his executive assistant said, Mike, you don't need to wait for them, just go in. So it was just him and I. Now I walked in there and he pointed at my shirt. He says, you always wear your cross, Mike. He said, are you a Christian? I said, yes, Mr. Trump, and this is a divine appointment. Well, we started talking. It was like talking to anyone, your best friend. He had no agenda, and then right away I just felt comfortable, and I go, you know what? I said, I'm going to have this recovery network that's going to save or help addicts, and I said, I used to be a crack cocaine addict, and I looked at him, and he goes, yeah, and I'm going to stop the drugs pouring in and all this stuff. Well, that meeting lasted 35 minutes, and there's that picture that I had seen in my dream. Rudy Giuliani had walked in and took that picture. Well, when I left there, I talked to his employees, and it was like talking to one of my employees. Every one of them had great things to say about him. Every single one of them said that he's a great boss, all these great things. So I knew God had chose him, and I got back to Minnesota, and I did a press release. And I was attacked, completely shut out. I was called, that I just met him. They didn't even know what we talked about. I was called a racist. I was called everything you could imagine. And then I knew, wow, I must be doing something right, because it's just like I was attacked on TV. When I first wore my cross on TV, I'm telling you, I would get attacked daily for that. Daily for standing up, even though I wasn't saved. I'd have people call me when I was the only call center. They'd call me up and they go, you're wearing your cross on TV and you should be ashamed of yourself, blah, blah, blah. I would go shoot back at them and tell them about, the end times, tell them about Jesus, and they'd find the Lord, and I go, there, take that, and I still wasn't saved, but then after that happened, all of a sudden, then I went all in, and now, people, even my friends, there's a picture with the president and I, and this showed up on national TV. I don't know if we have it, but this one here. When this showed up, I walked into the White House, and I'm going, wow. I didn't even think with my record I could ever get within 20 feet of D.C., and here I end up on TV, and my friends that were all ex-addicts, or a lot of them were still addicts, but this is the day they surrendered. What is this crackhead sitting next to the president? Jesus is real, because this is impossible. And this is, but those were the things that happened to me, where I'm starting to feel inside like, okay, this has to be all divine driven, okay? And I end up going into a retreat thing. It was called Operation Restore Warrior, and it's all men thing. We can go in, and way back in the day in 2008, I had actually went to my church and went to an outpatient treatment. This is after God had freed me of the desire, and they had planted seeds in that church, or that outpatient treatment. I started telling them about how much drugs I used to do and bragging it up, and they go, we don't care what you did, let's talk about your father. I go, what do you mean my father? I had a fine upbringing. My parents did divorce when I was 7, and they started showing you about how child wounds and father wounds and trauma can all affect addiction, affect us inside. And those seeds were planted way back in 2009, and now all of a sudden, I went into this Operation Restore Warrior, and I got that. Just getting invited there was a divine appointment, because it's for veterans, and I'm not a veteran, but they felt led by the Lord to have me in there. Well, I went in there with hope, and Kendra was, praying that I would be saved. And on the second day, this is February 18th, 2017, where I got on my knees and surrendered to Jesus. And I want to tell you, it wasn't at all what I expected. It was like a peace. I no longer felt overwhelmed. I no longer felt like I was going through mud. I know when we talk about prayer, people say, boy, sometimes I pray and they don't get answered. Well, I learned real fast after getting saved, it might not be God's will. Well, where is God's will? God's will is in the Word. So if you stay in the Word, you can be proactive in prayer. But I left there, and here's a guy that couldn't talk, and 2 months later, I ended up speaking to 50,000 millennials at US Bank Stadium, and right here. That was one of the scariest, but it wasn't scary. And then I had to lead them in prayer. I had never even led myself in prayer. I don't even know what I said, but here's what God did. You remember when those kids, remember when I first did that pillow show and all those people came back the next day to tell me how good the pillow was. I knew that day I was on the right path. It felt good. It felt really good. Well, here's what happened. After I did US Bank Stadium, I was so inside like, oh, did I say the wrong thing? Did I do the wrong, all these, anxiety. Well, 2 weeks later, my granddaughter and I, she was 8 years old, we went to an amusement park in Minnesota, and I think everyone at that stadium seemed to be at that park that day, and all these kids, 20 to 30 years old, kept coming up to me and going, your story changed my life, I found Jesus, and all these, it just kept going on and on and on. And finally, my granddaughter, she says, he's my grandpa, and we need to go on rides, but one of the things there is God showed me I was on the right path, that I was answering my calling. It felt good. It's the trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understandings, and always acknowledge Him, and He will guide your path. And that's Proverbs 3:5-6. That's one I live by now. He keeps me on the right path. And now to have the impact where God's put me in this platform, I'm going to show you the video that was this. You've probably all seen it this spring, and here it is. This is what are the odds some crackhead gets talk from the Rose Garden and off the cuff.
Thank
I don't
you,
know.
Mr. President, for your call to action, which has empowered companies like MyPillow to help our nation win this invisible war. Now I wrote something off the cuff, if I can read this. God gave us grace on November 8, 2016 to change the course we were on. God had been taken out of our schools and lives. A nation had turned its back on God. And I encourage you to use this time at home to get back in the Word, read our Bibles, and spend time with our families. Our president gave us so much hope where just a few short months ago, we had the best economy, the lowest unemployment, and wages going up. It was amazing. With our great president, vice president, and this administration, and all the great people in this country praying daily, we will get through this and get back to a place that's stronger and safer than ever.
Well, you'd think I'd have killed somebody that day. I did 109 interviews in 4 days, but there was so much hate that came after me for talking, for saying that. And it's a good thing I asked the president, because otherwise they would have blamed him for mixing church and state, But he was so surprised. If you looked at his face, he's going, okay. And then I couldn't even read my writing because I had wrote it 5 minutes before. That's a separate story, But here's what I'm seeing. The way we're at now is, like I said before, I'll go back to before the pandemic. Last fall, I was with some billionaire guy, and we were actually out hunting, and there was nothing around, so we started talking. We didn't know each other, and he says, Mike, he says, people don't reach out for God, and he said, unless something bad happens, like the Great Depression. And I said, no. I said, you know what? I said, in the Great Depression, they had God, but they were praying for physical things, food and shelter. I said, we have something better than that. We have addiction. And he looked at me and said, what? I said, addiction, their families, they're praying for their souls. They're lost. They're looking for hope. And we had this conversation. Well, then along came the pandemic. And so we're right now. So what I've taken for myself is on my Lindell Recovery Network, I put everyone out there, right now. We know people that have died from opiate, died from this, and from addiction nowadays. And like I said, addiction affects everyone, no matter how many forks you eat with. Well, if we also know people that have made it through, like I did, that Dick in my story. And when you know someone that's made it through, you need to go to them. How did you do it? And you're going to find out 9.999% of the time it was Jesus. And I don't know the other 0.001, so I just had to put a case to get me on, But I believe that right now we have the greatest opportunity in the history to get people off addiction and to get them to Jesus. The biggest revival ever. And if everyone out there, you've all, maybe a lot of you here have made it through addiction. And I know a lot of you are reaching out to people that need help, because right now they're all looking for hope. So they're so vulnerable out there. They're they're reaching out and looking for hope. And that's why, we as Christians, we need to stand up and say the answer is Jesus, and not be afraid to show who we are, And by the way, I will say this: if you're a businessman out there and if you're worried about sticking up for what you believe in, my biggest day of MyPillow is always the day I'm in, because God rewards standing up for what He says. But I want to thank you all for inviting me here. I want to tell you how important this rally is. I said it last night. I get so many requests now, and I just pray to God on each one. And this one just went, it was here. This was, of all the requests that come in, you guys must be doing an amazing thing, because God led me here. And I just believe all the people I met, you guys are amazing. You guys have put together something. I can't believe this many show up in the middle of a pandemic. But God bless you all, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay. Let's hear it again for Mike Lindell, ladies and gentlemen. Okay.